let's see if I can make this one work. I was told to be patient. That works. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to tell you, first of all, a little bit about the content of the report, the structure of the report, which doesn't mean that you get out of actually reading the report. That's why we brought it. And there's going to be a pop quiz tonight, so, you should read it probably. So the first chapter is about legal and institutional settings. It's going to give you general information about how our registries are run and general information on the formation steps you need to proceed to establish new business entities in the various regions and jurisdictions. This is also the chapter you will find information about beneficial ownership and security interest registries, and also the chapter where we talk a little bit about legal definitions, which is always a struggle for us because we're coming from all different parts of the world and we all have different ways of understanding legal terms, so we're trying to make it work. We're trying to find definitions that will work for all of us, which is hard and it's a work in progress, but you're going to find more information about that in the report. The second chapter is on processing time, which obviously is very interesting for us to see how are we doing, which jurisdictions are doing very well, how fast can they handle registration, the registration process. We focus on the registration process of incorporations and also changes to the registry, and it's measured in hours. I will talk a little bit about that later on. Then we also have the third chapter, which is about e-services, all about the different formats applications can be submitted to the registries, so like XML, PDF files, web-based applications, that's where you're going to find information about that. We also try to find a correlation between e-services and processing time to see if actually it does speed up the process when we have e-services and it's not all paper-based. The next chapter is about funding and fees, which is, self-explanatory. How are our registries funded? Are they government funded or through customer fees? And also, depending on which funding we have, do we actually do we have the cost covering principle? And also, we try to find a correlation between what it costs to register a new company and if that actually has an impact on how many new entities are formed in the jurisdictions. So that's what you're going to find in that chapter. Business dynamics, which is the fifth chapter. We try to assess the business climate in the different regions. And we try to, we measure that by the number of incorporations and the number of terminations, basically saying if there are a lot more incorporations than terminations, it's a fast-growing business environment. The sixth chapter is about the information in the business registers. This is a new chapter. We haven't had that one before. This is the general theme of this year's report. It's all about the quality of the data in our registries, the accessibility of the data, the reliability of the data, and also the use and reuse of the information that we all hold in our registries. Then we also have case studies this year. We have 4 in total. We have a case study from Estonia, a case study from Botswana, Suriname, and Colorado, and you're going to get more in-depth information from these jurisdictions, but also based on the general theme that I just pointed out in the 6th chapter. And then last, but definitely not least, we have our snapshots, which was a newcomer last year. That was a new introduction to our report. What we try to do is have, on one page, the most important information for each jurisdiction that you can grasp with one glance. And first of all, you can check if the information about your jurisdiction is true, and if it's not, point that out to us. But also, it's really good to just cross-reference and see in the snapshots how the jurisdictions are handling their registries. Okay. So, first chapter, as I said, legal and institutional settings. This time, I'm going to talk about. Oh no, I had to point it there. That was one too fast. No. Okay, so beneficial ownership. Especially for all the jurisdictions subject to European law, this is becoming, well, more important for us. There have been amendments made to the Anti-Money Laundering Directive. It's just been adopted. It's currently awaiting publication, and after publication, within 2 years' time, the jurisdictions will have to implement this in their systems some way. It doesn't have to be with business registers, but in some way, we will have to publish this, or the companies will have to publish information about their beneficial owners. I'm not going to give you like an in-depth definition of beneficial ownership, because that would be a presentation in itself. And if you have questions, ask Tim Moss. He knows all about beneficial ownership. But basically, well, this is what the directive tells us. It's a person or legal entity that has more than 25% control of voting rights or otherwise exercises control over the management of a company. The Financial Action Task Force simply states it's the ultimate beneficiary of the company's shares. So basically, it's just about who has the ownership benefits, although maybe the title or the legal ownership may be in another name. So as we can see, this is the second year we've included questions about beneficial ownership. And as you can see, there are still more jurisdictions, especially in the Americas and in Europe, that do not hold information about the beneficial owners of companies, whereas it is actually quite common in Africa and the Middle East and also in Asia Pacific. When we're referring to Africa and the Middle East, we need to be a bit careful when we're assessing that data. We did not have too many responses from that particular part of the world, but there, every jurisdiction apart from Botswana stated that they do actually publish information about beneficial owners. Whereas you can see here that in the Americas and in Europe, it's the other way around. Most of them do not hold any information about that, so it's not common yet, but we're thinking in the years to come that it's going to have to change. Patience does work, yeah. So these are the jurisdictions where the information about beneficial owners is held within the business registry, sorted by regions. And as you can see, it's 15 of the responding jurisdictions, so out of 93 responding jurisdictions, 15 in total do hold information about beneficial ownership in their registries. Did something happen there? Yep. But another 15 jurisdictions pointed out that there is information available about beneficial owners, but it's not held within the business registers. So in total, we have 30 jurisdictions that actually hold this information out of the 93. And yeah, we're probably going to have to include more questions about beneficial ownership to go into more detail, but that is the information we have as of now. Okay. So, security interest register, same story. I'm not going to give you a whole presentation about the security interest registers, but basically it establishes a framework for the registration of security interest in personal property. And as we can see, this type of register is most common in the Americas, with 66% of the responding jurisdictions pointing out that they do maintain a security interest register. That is actually decreased compared to last year. Last year we had 70%, but in total last year we had 23 respondents from the Americas, and this year we have 41 responding jurisdictions from the Americas, and 27 out of these 41, well, stated that they maintain a security interest register. So it actually, it's not true to say that it has decreased. That's just statistics, that's how that works. For Europe, that number actually has increased significantly. This is the third year we have included questions about security interest registries in our jurisdictions. And the first time, so 2 years ago, 5 out of 34 European jurisdictions stated that they do maintain a security interest register. Last year, 11 responded saying they do maintain a security interest register, and that was with the same amount of respondents from that region. And this year, we have a total of 16 jurisdictions that, from Europe, out of 35 responding jurisdictions that maintain a security interest register. So probably also something we will explore more in depth for the time to come. Okay, so processing time. Ooh, no? Yeah, good. Processing time. As I said, this is important to all of us. How are we performing? How are we doing? How quickly are we handling registration process? How quickly are we handling changes and changes to already established entities? And also, how quickly are we handling incorporations? This is basically why we're doing this. It's about benchmarking. It's about trying to see how other jurisdictions are doing, and if they're doing well, what are they doing, to learn from what they are doing so we can all improve our performances. Okay, so on the horizontal bar, you can see measured in hours, that is, the time on average it takes to process the incorporation of a new company, which is an average of 18.4 hours, whereas it takes us, on average, 23.4 hours to register changes to existing legal entities. That is actually, with 44%, a rather strong correlation, though, so it takes us, well, just about the same time to process incorporations and changes. Changes take us a little longer, which might have to do with the fact that it's more difficult when it comes to like mergers or something, so the legal checks might be, well, more difficult. Okay, when we break that down to the 4 regions and also the format the applications are handed in, we can see by far it takes us the longest when applications are handed in paper format, and it gets quicker, faster, the more digital the format, which is great because that's the first time we could actually say that. Last year we were trying to find that, but we did not in the data. This year we actually did see that it takes us a lot less time the more digital the format gets. When we just like break it down to the format, we can see like it's 27.9 hours to handle a registration that has been handed in paper format, compared to 7.7 when it's data, like XML, which is more than 20 hours longer, which is a pretty long time. So as I just stated, the processing time, it becomes a lot faster the more digital the application becomes. Which is a good thing, because I think we're all spending a lot of money and a lot of time and effort to digitalize our registers, so it's a good thing that we're getting faster with that. And we have actually spotted a trend also that those jurisdictions that have mandatory e-services are the ones that are the top performers when it comes to processing time. So in our top 10 performers, there are 8 jurisdictions that actually have mandatory e-services, whereas the bottom 10, the ones that take the longest, there's actually only 1 jurisdiction that uses mandatory e-services. But I mean, when I'm pointing out the bottom 10, do bear in mind that we can't go into detail about what kind of legal checks go into the registration process in every jurisdiction, so that obviously also will impact the processing time. So, but we see in total, on average, that those jurisdictions that use mandatory e-services take 8.8 hours to register a new company when it has been newly incorporated, whereas those that do not use mandatory e-services will take 21.2 hours. Okay, so more about e-services. Stacy, I think, is going to tell you all about that.
Thanks, Celia. I'm going to try my best with the clicker, so bear with me if it doesn't work. Yeah, so I'm going to take you through two of the chapters in the report. Firstly, e-services. And Celia has kind of given a pretty good intro to that chapter, actually. I think, you know, e-services, it's been talked about for a long time, and it's still, I think, an important topic for discussion. Seen as a key enabler to drive costs down, to streamline processes, and also to provide joined-up services with other organisations. And there are lots of examples of that in the report. Knowledge sharing, I think, you know, it's the reason why we're all here. And knowledge sharing, particularly in this arena, I think is a focal point. And hopefully that the information that you see in the report will complement that initiative. So I do urge you all to have a good read through it. Okay, good. So the first chart that you can see there, that shows you accepted forms of applications for incorporation of private limited companies. When we ask that question in the survey, we do ask it of lots of different entity types. The reason that we focus on private limited companies is because that tends to be one of the most common entity types that are registered. And the purpose is to explore whether electronic delivery methods are becoming more widely accepted. Now, the results show that you can see paper is, once again, the most widely accepted form of application, and that's a similar pattern to previous years, with the exception of the Americas this year, actually, where there's been a significant percentage increase in the number of jurisdictions accepting paper applications. But actually, I think that could be explained by the fact that there's been a significant increase in the number of respondents from the Americas, and it's increased actually almost double from 23 last year to 41 this year. Overall, when we look at electronic delivery methods, we can see that internet is the most widely accepted. But unfortunately, there's no real clear indication that electronically submitted applications are becoming more widely accepted, which is, I guess, an odd result, but it's what it tells us. Okay, so the next chart looks at whether the entire formation process is available electronically. So the reason that we look into this is because the ability to complete the entire process electronically can be viewed as a key enabler in the ease of doing business, both from the perspective of the process itself being more streamlined, and also the potential to set up things like one-stop shops with other agencies. So when we ask this question, in order for the process to be seen as entirely electronic, jurisdictions have to answer that the filling out of information, signature, payment, and the issuance of an incorporation certificate can all be done electronically. So the results don't really show a great degree of variance across the regions, but the picture is interesting because actually it looks like for jurisdictions where it's possible to complete the process electronically, the number has actually decreased, which again is a slightly strange result. Is that working? Yeah, okay. So the next chart there looks at the use of e-services rather than the availability. So we focus on two aspects, the formation of entities and changes to entities in the register. So what that shows us is that with the exception of Africa and the Middle East, the percentage of electronic submissions is higher for changes than it is for formation. And that's actually a trend that's been apparent over a number of years. What I will say about Africa and the Middle East is it's difficult for us, and I think Celia has alluded to that, it's difficult for us to actually say with any sort of confidence really that there is a trend in Africa and Middle East because unfortunately there was quite a low number of respondents from that region. The next one is quite interesting, mandatory e-services. There's been a significant increase this year in the number of jurisdictions that have told us that there are mandatory e-services for at least one entity type. About 24% of all respondents said that was true of their jurisdiction. Last year it was only about 10%. So this is really just information, you know, so I think if you were a jurisdiction that was planning to introduce mandatory e-services, you could look at the list there and maybe contact one of those jurisdictions and see how they went about it, the issues they faced, that kind of thing. Next, please. So there's a lot of words there. I don't expect you to read that. It's just a snapshot from the report, which shows you that there are lots of examples where jurisdictions have made major changes in their registry in the area of e-services. That's all contained in the annex in the report, and in Chapter 3 on e-services, we've kind of pulled some of those examples out that are relevant. So that was all on e-services. The next chapter I'm going to talk about is funding and fees. So really, this chapter was based on just mainly 4 questions, actually, and that they are, how is the business register funded? For what services does the business register collect fees? Are those fees determined by the cost-covering principle? And what fee does the business register charge for forming an entity? So actually, we can actually get a lot of information out of these 4 seemingly basic questions when we cross-reference it with some of the questions from the survey. So the first thing we'll look at there is the source of funding. So when we asked that question, a slim majority of the respondents, 52%, indicated that they were primarily funded through customer fees, and the remaining respondents indicated that they were primarily funded by the government. And that only differs marginally from results in previous surveys. So now we are going to drill down into the regional picture. And when we look at that, we can see in Africa and the Middle East, government funding is the primary source. And again, just a word of caution about seeing that as a trend due to the low number of respondents. In Europe, just under half of respondents, 47%, indicated that government funding was their primary source, and that's down from 55% in the previous year. So the majority of respondents then, that's 53%, are now funded by customer fees. And given the relative consistency of respondents in that region, we can probably sort of safely say that that's indicative of a trend. In Asia Pacific, customer fees is also the primary source of funding. And in Americas, the same. That's 56% of respondents said they were funded through customer fees. And again, that's consistent with last year's results. And of the jurisdictions that said they were funded by customer fees, 71% also confirmed that they actually retain those fees. Here we go. So regardless of the source of funding, the vast majority of registers indicated that they charge fees for at least some of their services. And the fact that the business register might be primarily funded by the government is not particularly indicative of whether or not they collect fees. We can see that it's most common to collect fees for entity formation. That's 86% confirmed that. The next most common fees are for changes to the entities in the register, and then fees for information. And although all the registers collect some form of fees, 75% actually said that some of the services they provide are free of charge. Okay, so the next one looks at the source of funding and average formation fee. So the fee setting for formation actually varies hugely between registers. We had a range of up to between no charge at all, absolutely free, to as much as €500. So formation fees, that covers all entity types that we look at. So that's sole traders, that's general partnerships, that's public companies, private companies, limited companies and LLCs in each jurisdiction. The trend is actually the same as in previous years, where the average formation fee is lower for organisations that do not rely on government funding. And that's with the exception of Africa and the Middle East. This year, the average cost of formation across all entity types funded by fees was €94 or 135 US dollars, compared to last year's figure of €193 or 270 US dollars. So that was all on the charts, I think. I'm just going to talk a little bit about one more thing, which there's no slide for it, but I think it's maybe an interesting one, which is that something we looked at was called the Big Mac Index. And what that is, it's a comparative tool which was come up with, I think, in 1986, which looks at the cost of a very common commodity which everyone can relate to, the Big Mac. And it compares various prices converted into a common currency and based solely on the cost of a Big Mac, considers whether a currency might be over or undervalued. So it's an interesting one, and we looked at it last year and this year. Last year there wasn't really any kind of correlation, and so we compared the Big Mac Index to the cost of formation of an entity, and it did actually show a moderate to strong relationship. So it's an interesting one, and again, I urge you to have a look in the report at that one. So that was all from me, and Magdalena will now take you through the rest of the report. Thank you.
So, hi. As Celia told you, we've made an attempt this year again to try to analyze business dynamics based on new registration and terminations. So here we can see the percentage of new registrations versus the percentage of terminations. And we can see that in the upper right corner, we have a relatively high percentage of new registrations and a high percentage of terminations. These jurisdictions that are found in this upper right corner, they are considered to be the most dynamic, since it is implied that new companies replace old and unsuccessful ones, and this contributes to the flow of innovation and change in the economy. And here we find many of the European and many of the American jurisdictions. In the upper left corner, we see that new registration is relatively high, but the percentage of termination is relatively low. These jurisdictions, they are characterized as being dynamic and fast-growing. We find many of the Asian Pacific jurisdictions here, as well as many of the African and Middle East jurisdictions. In the bottom left corner, we find stable economies with a small percentage of both new registrations and terminations. Termination is replaced by new registrations in a steady process. Here we find European and American jurisdictions. And in the bottom right corner, we find jurisdictions that are characterized by a slower business dynamics. They have relatively low new registration and a relatively high termination. There are not many jurisdictions in this quadrant, but the majority are Europeans. Here we can see the same sorted by region. We have percentage of new registrations and percentage of terminations. We can see that the percentage of new registration is higher in all regions than the percentage of terminations. This indicates that we have a positive inflow of companies across the board. And we have tried to rule out business registers activities that could alter the data, like if you take off inactive companies. But we're not sure that we are successful in doing this, but we've tried at least. As my colleagues told you, and as this conference is showing, is that business registers across the world contain a great deal of information, and this information is useful for the business community. But as my colleagues Stacy and Celia shown you, there's differences in how the business registers are organized and run, and there's also a difference in what tasks the business registers have. Some register entity information, while others have broader tasks and are mandated to take more decisions. For these reasons, there are also differences to what information can be found within the business registers. So as Annika told you, this year we wanted to dig deeper into a specific area, which means that we had to include new questions. And we were hoping to explore the value of data that the business registers hold. And here are the results. Since value is hard to define and measure, and since the questionnaire and the survey is directed to you that are providers of data and not users of the data primarily, we had to find other variables as indicators for value. So we included questions on what information is provided, how the information is used and reused, what is the quality of information, how reliable is the information, and how easy is it to access the information. Nope. I broke it. Now I'm afraid to touch it. So first we look at what information is made available in this chapter. And in general, it is common to make information available on the Business Register website. The most commonly provided information service is information on existing company names or entity names, followed by entity search services. Yay! We used annual accounts as an example on how information is made available. 49% of the respondents, they collect annual accounts. And when annual accounts are collected, it is very common to make them available, both on paper and electronically. And we can see that Europe and the Americas are the two regions where annual accounts for some jurisdictions are collected but not made available. And we can also see that in Asia and Pacific, it is most common to make them available only on paper. But that data and information is made available does not necessarily mean that it's being used. Therefore, we tried to include questions on usage of information. We had one question on the number of searches and downloads that was introduced this year. And this question was made an open answer, free text answer question, so it's really hard to put in a chart. But you can find it in the report in a table. It seems like information on company data, information or annual accounts and annual returns are the most requested pieces of information. We also asked if the business register use data of other authorities or if they provide other authorities with data. And this is what is shown here. It appears to be much more common that business registers provide others with data than it is that they use data of others. But we made a slight mistake with this question because we didn't allow for the respondents to choose both. So it's likely that all the answers here are underestimated. We can also see in free text answers that many say that they both use and provide others with data. And as I said, many of the respondents did choose to complement their answer with the free text answer. No. What am I doing wrong?
Just talk us through it. No?
Nope.
Try and put it on the left and press it.
No.
Try and what? Just leave it on the left.
There's a signal here. I don't know why. It's down there.
That was working when I was doing it. Yeah, it's broken.
I broke it. Uh-oh. So here are some examples of the free text answers provided to this question on use and reuse. And it seems that when you provide others with data, it's most often that it's a tax authority. In order to make data interesting, you need to be able to show the slide. Oh, no. No. No, it's just jumping around now. Yeah. Yes. In order to make data interesting and to make people being able to use the data, it's important that the data is of good quality and that you can rely on the data. So one indicator of quality is the level of verification of the identity of the one who is submitting data to the register. And so we asked about the level of verification of identity. And we can see that user ID and password is the most common way in general. And in the Americas, we can see that there are several jurisdictions who state that they don't require a verification at all. There was also a category of other, and some examples of the free text answers given to that.
Ask if they can help you.
Can you push it once? Maybe I need someone to do this for me.
Just make a signal when you want to change the slide, okay?
Make a signal.
Okay.
Just wait.
No, I don't even know. So can we find the last one, verification of identity? Mm. Yes. Oh, no, this is the right one. Thank you. So here are some examples of respondents choosing the other category in the previous slide and giving free text answers as to what others means. One more. Can you move one? At least it's not my fault now. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying not to look at that now. So we also asked about information, how often is information updated, because if you ask for information, it's important that you're able to rely on information being the latest information submitted to the register. So we had a question on if information is updated in real time, and it shows that most registers in all regions, they do update information in real time. Among those who do not update in real time, they state that they update the register at least daily, so it's quite often. Even though information is available, it doesn't mean that it's easy to access, and there are many barriers to accessing information. Some examples are if the format that the information is presented in, that you need to have a special software to be able to read the data. Another one is if there's a fee connected to accessing the information, or if you need to be a registered user in order to access the information. So we have included questions on that as well, to be able to see if it's easy to access the information within the register. So I'm just going to skip a few pages. And as Celia told you, we have the case studies again this year. New ones, we were able to include one from each organization, which is quite good for us, and they all dig deeper into the theme and answer questions on if the registry is part of a one-stop shop, which renders several government services in one location, how often information in the register is updated, and if the registry uses information from others. So they all aim at the value of data, the theme of the year. And then we had the snapshots, as Celia told you, and since it was so much appreciated, introduced as a newcomer last year, it became a keeper, so this is something that we're going to continue work on. And now I was going to show you some examples of snapshots, but you can just imagine them. And I want to thank all of you for contributing to this year's report, and the next year we hope to make it at least 100 respondents. So, and if you have any suggestions on how to improve, or if you have any suggestions on what you want to have included in the snapshots, for instance, please let us know. And if you have suggestions on the theme for next year. So now I'm going to give the word back to Annika. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the challenge to do this. Good job. I need some technical update. If it's down.
They are trying to solve it.
Okay.
We have no slides for them
No
now.
slides, but do we have a connection? No connection. We don't have any connection. Okay, just give me 1 second. We will just see how we can do this.
To begin the next session, Sloan Connie, before lunch, and then we go lunch and continue the first session.
So what we will do now, we will see if we can come back to our video contacts later this afternoon. But to be able to continue, we will do like that. We will start the next session a bit earlier and do that part now. So I just want these people to come down here. I think, well, it's Andres. It's coming. I have to have some information, what is happening. Is there, when you wait, is there any questions for the survey and for the working group at the moment? Yes, please. There should be a microphone somewhere. Yeah.
My name is Russell Perry from Company.com, and I have a question for you regarding. We looked at the cost of the e-filing. I'm sorry, the e-filing and the timing that's associated with the e-filing, right? Time of incorporation. Is there any way to extract also information and data on the costs associated with it? Like how much more cheaper is it to e-file, to incorporate through the website, etc., versus the paper version?
Yeah, that's not a distinction that we've made in previous years, but certainly it's a question that we could ask. I think that's definitely possible. I'm not sure if. Yeah, I mean, I think that's easy to ask, and the results would be, easy to see, and yeah, we'll definitely look into that for next year. Thanks for that. That's a really good suggestion. And we haven't got any information on that at the moment, so.
Okay, thank you. It was actually just a question, not a suggestion.
Yeah.
But
okay, but no, I mean,
no,
it's a good, suggestion.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
But there is another question. The microphone, please.
Thank you. It's just a question, technical presentation regarding the graph you've been sending every year, where you show the number of companies or entities incorporated versus the number of liquidation or striking off. It's very interesting as a general statistic, which is much more of interest for each of us as a member, is to position our registry versus the other one and versus the slow down one on the one in the top. And in the past, we had 2 letters identifying the registry. I know it may sound as politically correct or incorrect to disclose, but we're not pointing the fingers. The aim of this form is to situate where we are. And I think if you don't put the initial to identify the individual registry, it's losing quite a lot of the interest of the graph. That was I just wanted to say.
I agree with you, but there is a table in the report where you can find the numbers for each jurisdiction.
But how do you link the number to the point?
Because you have the percentage and you can position yourself in the graph.
No, you cannot find the U point on the graph if you don't put the initials.
You can, but
yeah.
we can show you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I can show you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Andrea. Andrea, can you please give the mic?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, ladies. What I saw, there was 0% in Africa and very low percentages on the data on closing the companies. So that makes, the business dynamics kind of vague in the statistics. I wanted to just share with you our story. but what usually happens is that companies are not really eager to submit the changes, the returns. And what they are doing, they are waiting for 2 years of not submitting the annual report, and then they are deleted automatically. So I would be really interested for me to see in this survey the closing of company procedure, because from my experience it's quite more complicated, more costly, and more long. It takes more time. So this is just a suggestion, and maybe some help to you to explain these dynamics in zeros, because it doesn't make sense to have a high, incorporating number of new companies and then such a low number of closed companies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. We'll take that under consideration. Rauni.
Yes, Rauni Hagman from Finland. I was interested in these time schedule figures and timeliness of incorporations of companies, and of course that's always a question what is included in the processing time. So I was wondering if the search for company names is also included in that time schedule, or is it excluded in that time measurements?
You will find this information in the report. Basically, when we were trying to find out the average processing time, we had to factor in certain things like queuing and also registering the entity name and whether or not this would take some time. But to get like a clean set of data, we're working with the perfect registration. So no amendments, no queuing, but it's all in the report. You'll find information about that.
Thank you very much. And again, if you have proposals or suggestions, and Vito have one. So.
Yes, Vito from Italy. Hi. It's not a question, but just information to the group. Celia shown as one of the first slides the situation of beneficial owner register in a different jurisdiction. Now, as ECRF, we are going to launch probably a small project in order to continue this analysis. What's going on in the area of the beneficial owner all over Europe because of the implementation of the anti-money laundering directive, how this system will be developed in each country, which kind of data will be available, to whom will be available, with technical standard used in different jurisdictions in building this kind of new register, and this study will be shared with all members of the ECRF and will be presented next year as an outcome of this small project. Thank you.
Yeah, so you will have more information about that. Thank you. So I think we would like to do this now. We close this session and see what we can come back with. And I will give the floor to Andres, together with one of our colleagues, to start the other presentations. And I'm absolutely sure that you will really like to have some more time in the afternoon. So before lunch, Andres, please.